So welcome everybody to the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee of Tuesday the 15th of October. Those of you who are committee members online, and particularly welcome to any residents who may be watching either just now live on the 15th of October or at some future stage. You're very welcome. I'm sure you'll find the meeting itself has got some very interesting reports. We're going to be looking today at socially responsible procurement strategy, and really what does that mean? We're going to be looking at the reduction strategy for those who are not in education, employment or training within the county. And we're also going to be looking at Welsh in education as a strategic plan. So they're very different actual reports, and I hope everybody who may be watching online finds them interesting and the discussion and questions and answers informative. Due to the availability of officers and cabinet members, we're going to switch around items number 4 and 6. That's to say, we'll start with item 6 on the agenda, which is the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, and we will get to socially responsible procurement strategy as the third of the main reports. So we'll start with apologies for absence. I know that Councillor Crook was joining the meeting and he may be there any minute now. Indeed, there he is. Welcome, Councillor Crook. Good to see you there.
And we have apologies from Councillor Pavia, Chair, with Councillor Jan Butler as a substitute.
That's it. Fantastic. Good to see Councillor Butler here. Thanks very much for substituting for Councillor Pavia, Councillor Butler. And item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any that we're aware of? None, so we'll move on to 3, the public open forum. Any points that have arisen from the public?
No one today, Chair.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting, though, that these are items that in our everyday discussions with residents, I know that there are issues within these reports that they're very interested in. So, our encouragement for residents to actually, if not looking at the meeting, actually looking at the reports, I think it's something we could all encourage our residents to do. The agendas are very interesting. So we're going to start with move on to item number 6, which is the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan to begin with. And I don't know who wishes to open that. Councillor Griffiths, did you want to? You're looking round. I thought Councillor Grokup might want to start, but you were looking around charmingly as if to say, "Pick me." Yeah. So, Councillor Grokup, did you want to introduce the report and then move to officers?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly. It's exciting times for Welsh medium education in Monmouthshire at the moment, I think. I would highlight particularly the opportunity that we've taken to open new Welsh medium primary school in Monmouth. And the final steps have been completed for us to enable in Abergavenny the transfer of Ysgol Gymraeg Gafenni to the former Derry View site, which will enable the school to expand and really to enable Welsh primary education to really fulfil its potential in that part of the county. So I think we live in exciting times, and I'm really very proud to be part of that. I think we've developed an excellent relationship with officials in Cardiff Bay who clearly are very supportive of what we're trying to do, and it's a great partnership at that level as well. But we've got Sharon, who's here this afternoon, who has really driven the WESP, and I'd like to congratulate you on that. It's a statutory duty, and it sets out very clearly the direction of travel for Welsh medium education in Monmouthshire. So I think that's quite enough from me, Chair.
I'm not going to agree with you, Councillor Grocott, because that might be offensive, but thank you for the introduction. And Sharon, did you want to pick up the key points from the report itself, and then we'll open for questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Martin. The WESP annual report presented today is a second update in the covering the progress made in meeting our aspirations for the WESP, and it covers a period from July 2023 to July 24. Just for information, we monitor this regularly through our Welsh in Education Forum, and the information from that is submitted into this annual review report to be submitted to Welsh Government, and they feed back to us on an annual basis. We haven't received this year's annual feedback, but nevertheless the report has been submitted. It contains details of progress in all 7 outcomes of the WESP, current risks, further actions to mitigate against the risks, and our next steps. And some of the information included in the current version that you have at your disposal does not reflect really the current position, because things do move on very quickly. So overall, this year, we've made fairly good progress in many areas and strong progress in others. For example, in outcome 1, we targeted 67 Welsh medium early education places for 2024, and we achieved 74. However, the number and percentage of pupils transferring from Welsh medium early education is 74%. It's just below our target of 80%, but it is pretty close to that. The number of pupils we have in Welsh medium education in Monmouthshire in September 24 in reception is 57, and that's above the 48 that we started, but it is below our target, and this is due in this particular year to a lower than expected intake in Ysgolofenni. It's not unusual for schools to have a slightly lower intake rate from time to time, and this is just the year that that's happened for us. However, the number of reception pupils in Ysgolofenni is at its highest in 2024, 25 pupils, and this is a result of the success of the immersion provision that has been established within the school in the last 3 years. So for a number of years we were looking at intakes of around 11, possibly 12, even less at times, and now 25 is taking us towards the 30 we would expect them to be in order to achieve our target at the end of the 2031. I'm delighted to say, and following on from Martin, that we have 2 reception pupils in Ysgol Trefynnoedd, our new Welsh medium school in Monmouth. In total, there are 20 pupils today who are already attending the school, and that is from nursery to year 2. I visited recently, and it's absolutely thriving. The children are well settled, and the staff are, doing a lovely job in welcoming the children and immersing them in the Welsh language. And currently, 60% of our pupils across the 3 schools, 65% of that number is 65%, sorry. The number of pupils in our schools currently in our Welsh medium provision in reception is 65.5% of our 10-year target. So whilst there's still a long way to go, the inertia that we have had to overcome in the first few years should be built on significantly as we move towards 2031, and we hope to be close to the target by the time we get there. 27 pupils transferred into Welsh Medium Secondary School in 2022, and we had the same number this year. We were certainly in Ysgolofenni, numbers and percentages of children transferring is around about 75%, which is much higher than it used to be. But unfortunately this year in Aveni, the numbers transferring were only 55%. So again, differences between the 2 schools. And again, that fluctuates from year to year. It's parental preference. Often it's pupil preference as well. Some children really enjoy being in Welsh Medium Primary School, but then decide not to move to secondary school. Delighted to say that 95% of pupils gained a GCSE in second language Welsh in 2024, and that's above 4 percentage points above our target, which is very helpful, and that's quite a recent statistic. As far as outcome 7 is concerned, it's very difficult for us, it's been difficult over the years for us to capture the data regarding the workforce, partly because the data is based on information that is provided to us by individuals and their determination of what their level of Welsh skill is at the time. But I think the capture this year is the most accurate that we've had since the start of the work on this particular WESP. So results with previous years are not necessarily meaningful. In some areas, there have been a dip in the numbers that we see, but in other areas there have been a strength. But we now know going forward we have a strong basis on which to work and to move forward. There are some challenges and risks that present themselves within the WESP. One is recruitment. Certainly in order to secure that and sustain that growth in Welsh medium as the demand increases. I don't think that's a problem just for Monmouthshire. It's a problem that is felt across Wales as that demand increases. And for us, maintaining that demand in Welsh medium education and ensuring that all parents and pupils have the opportunity to engage in a bilingual education should they wish to do so will be a challenge and a risk for us going forward in the future. Similarly, we need to ensure that the pupils who are in our English medium schools are benefiting from the growth in Welsh medium across the authority so that all of our learners have the opportunity to develop a certain level of skills in the Welsh language before they leave school. And then our next steps are to continue to grow the provision, to open a second immersion class to support that increase in demand and the opportunity for pupils who wish to engage in Welsh medium in later years, so from year 3 upwards. We need to develop a process to measure learner progression in linguistic skills. We don't have an All Wales agreement to that framework at the moment, and because Monmouthshire has 2 schools that have very different ways of measuring progress, feeding into 2 different schools in different local authorities, it's a challenge, but we're working on that. And to improve transition rates for primary into secondary Welsh medium schools.
Thank you, Sharon. We're working on the assumption that colleagues have had the chance to look through the report and hopefully read it. So that's a very helpful summary. And there are obviously some encouraging aspects to that. There are always challenges, and that never changes in that respect. We'll ask colleagues now to raise points and put their questions accordingly, if that would be okay. So I'm going to start with Councillor Strong.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. There's a great deal of meaningful information in there. I'm looking at the English medium secondary schools. Good to see that figure of 95% getting GCSE second language Welsh, and quite a number of those would presumably be achieving it at grades that would allow them to go on to take the subject at AS or A level. But seeing that, I note that only 18 in the county, according to the latest figures, doing AS or A level Welsh. That's presumably spread over 4 schools and over 2 year groups, 12 and 13. Are you concerned that figure is well, to me it seems to be very low, and also the problem of how the head teachers afford that with classes that would be that small? I think other subjects would struggle to be allowed to stay on the timetable with classes that small. Is there additional financial support for Welsh teaching at A level? So that's my first question. My next question is much more factual. Can you say a bit more about is it the ES Go? I assume that's a distance learning or online program. How does that work? Is that purely online, or is there a teacher backup with that? Be interested to know that. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. So to answer the first one, we have a very small number at the moment of pupils who are progressing to AS and A level, partly because there is a real difficulty in recruiting Welsh language specialists to teach A-level and AS level. However, I think in the past it would be fair to say that the benefits to having a bilingual education or the ability to speak Welsh in the workforce have not been progressed or promoted as they have or they are doing now. So lots of schools are promoting opportunities that would be beneficial for young people to participate in if they have Welsh as there's some skills in Welsh, and there's a constant feature now in careers programmes and offers. And also the introduction of the Ysgol programme is really helpful because it's enabled us to provide tutoring online. It's a programme that's developed and it's used across Wales. There is a suite of subjects that students can participate in. The Welsh language is one of the ones that we have joined and identified this year within a suite of 4 with all 4 secondary schools. So all of the secondary schools have engaged in the Ysgol project and training, and they've all started to roll that out from September 2024. So by the end of the year, we will be able to see how successful that programme is and to look and see if that is having an impact on an increase in the number of pupils who wish to take AS and A-level as one of their subjects. So I hope that answers both questions. There is no additional funding for Welsh language particularly, but schools will use their post-16 funding to be able to support the classes, but obviously the economies of scale using Ysgol will certainly help that.
Thanks very much. So we have trouble recruiting suitably qualified teachers. Are we still able to offer A-level Welsh in all 4 of our schools? And
Yes.
just going back on the Ysgol thing again, is that purely talking to a computer, so to speak, or do they get a human being at some stage to speak to as part of that?
I think Will would like to answer that question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Will McLean, Chief Officer, Children and Young People. The Ysgol project is really interesting, Councillor Strong. It's a programme that allows us to continue those A-level provisions which otherwise would be under threat due to the size of classes. It's taught remotely for the majority of the time, but the students do come together on a regular basis for face-to-face engagement with their learners, with their colleague peers and their teachers. We offer 4 subjects, as Sharon has said, so Welsh A-level, economics, computer science and Spanish. Each of the 4 secondary schools has taken on a lead role for one of those, and it allows us to maintain the breadth of that curriculum delivery. So it's a combination. Interestingly, I was in your local secondary school in the last couple of the weeks with the Cabinet Secretary looking at how Ysgol works. She was really impressed with that, and to see the learners interacting in live real time with their teacher, who was located in Monmouth at the time, and it works really well. And the technology suite that's been developed to promote it and the equipment that's been procured to allow that to happen is really, really effective.
Thanks for that. That does answer the question about Ysgol. Yeah, face-to-face as part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Thank you, Will, and Sharon too. I was interested, Sharon, you mentioned the small number progressing to AS and A level. And if I understood what you were saying, part of what you were saying in somehow trying to unpick why that might be, that previously Welsh within the workforce was not so strongly promoted as it is now. I was just trying to understand Welsh within our English-speaking secondary schools has now been taught for more than half a century. Is it a matter of just momentum, or is it just that we, as a country, we've not got round to promoting Welsh within the workforce within Monmouthshire until now? Why would we believe it's now going to start happening?
Well, I think Welsh has always been around, and in schools we've been teaching it as a second language for a while, and there has been a growth in the first language schools. However, I would say that as we're looking towards the government's aspiration to have a million Welsh speakers in Wales by 2050, there is a real imperative for us to be able to support that growth. Education plays a big part in that, but it's also the fact that, you know, many of the opportunities that will be available from now and going forward will actually require Welsh to some degree. In many posts now, it's essential, particularly in government posts, but in lots of them, it's a desirable skill, you know, across our schools, as well as, you know, in the wider local authority. And therefore, for us to be promoting it within our careers, work and the work in schools is certainly something that we feel is really important to give all our learners the best opportunity. And I think that that's a momentum across Wales in order to support that ambition of a million Welsh speakers. It's an ambitious one, but all aspects and areas of you know, the work of the local authority and the community will contribute to that.
Thanks, Sharon. And it's such an important but interesting area as well. If the strategy significantly would be putting it too strongly, but if there is an interdependency between support within the workforce for Welsh speaking, is there an assumption that AS and A-level numbers will increase if that is the case, so the former will promote the latter? You know, which comes first?
I think it's very difficult to say which comes first, because it would be really good to see the numbers increase at A and AS level. But it depends why you choose those subjects and what your aspirations are then from that point forward. But certainly to have an ability to speak a second language will help you in other languages in the future. It also helps the way your brain works, etc. So it is an aspiration to increase that number, but I don't think it is going to be the only thing or the driving force that will determine the million Welsh speakers. It will be the levels of Welsh throughout the community, throughout the local authority, that will support it. And even within education, there are lots of interrelated aspects of that, which, you know, we would support with workforce in order to provide the opportunities to develop, promote and use the Welsh language in our daily life.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sharon. And moving on to Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Diolch, Cadeirydd. Hoffwn ni dweud llongyfarchiadau ar agoriad Ysgol Gymraeg Trefynwy. I'd like to say thank you very much for opening Ysgol Gymraeg Trefynwy in September and welcoming the 19 pupils there, so congratulations on that. My question, two questions, is, and I think you touched on this briefly with the years 12 and 13, but how is the Council assessing and promoting the demand for Welsh medium education across all the age groups in Monmouthshire? And two is, how does Monmouthshire Welsh Education Strategic Plan align with the government goal of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050? What are the annual targets for Monmouthshire, and are we meeting these targets?
Diolch. And well, I've got to start somewhere, Martin. So, I mean, it pales into relative insignificance after listening to Marion. Sharon.
Okay, thank you for your questions. So, it is really important that we promote the benefits of Welsh medium education, and in order to do that, we do that through the information that we publish in our schools booklet. But promotion is much wider than that. So as part of our WEF, we have a promotion subgroup, and they meet regularly to determine what are the key aspects and areas that will be coming up over the next couple of months, and they promote the language accordingly. So, for example, at the Ask Show, there will be a stand there promoting Welsh language that will have officers there, as well as members of WEF, as well as representatives from schools, and they will be talking about those benefits. Parents will be there. There's a lot of information on our social media feed. There are lots of things that are accessible to parents and to young people and learners. Lots of opportunities for Welsh events. So if there are wider wider community events, they're promoted. So there's a whole sort of strategic plan around the promotion of Welsh language. For example, if there are T of E events and things, they're promoted again, and they can come through the local authority for promotion. We're in the process, as basic as banners outside schools to advertise things that are going on, to a full sort of social media events being published. Okay. So.
And the Welsh, apologies. How are we meeting the 1 million Welsh speakers by 25? Are there targets? Are we meeting those targets?
So the target in Monmouthshire is 105 reception pupils by 2031, and that's over. So Welsh Government give us an indicative target, but we've set ours slightly higher. So we are on our way to that target. We're sort of, I think the quote was 65% towards that now. I think in the first few years, it's always difficult to start a seedling school. I have to say, 1920 is a good number to start an initial school, but it always takes a little bit of time to build that up and to build that momentum. But, again, we're promoting Trefonwy. When they opened, that was promoted very effectively by the local authority, but also all of the schools. The immersion provision is promoted again in the local areas. When we set up the second immersion provision, we'll promote that as well, so that we're opening up those opportunities to everyone within that community as much as possible. And that can be through leafleting, again, it'll be through promotion of the provision itself, through the schools and through ourselves.
Councillor, how's your...
No, just the way, diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Excellent. Nisaf, Councillor Garrett.
Thank you for the presentation. I was at the first parent meeting with Councillor Grucut and Will, and there was one parent there for Ysgol Gymraeg Trefonwy. So it's a huge success to get 19 pupils there after what the beginnings we had a couple of years ago. It's an immense achievement. Looking at where we might go with Welsh language in the future, I work with a colleague whose daughter goes to a Welsh medium comprehensive school. I know the results at these schools are fantastic. I lived in Cardiff and Whitchurch, where there's Glantaf School. So looking to the future, could we see a comprehensive school in Monmouthshire? Do you think, is that something that's feasible? And if so, what could we learn from the other parts of South Wales where these schools are thriving and achieving fantastic academic results? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Will McLean.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Garrett, for your question. We are currently involved in a partnership discussion about the provision of a secondary Welsh medium school for Monmouthshire. Currently, I think it reflects really positively that the secondary provision for secondary Welsh learners from Monmouthshire is on a partnership basis. So children in the south of the county attend Gwent Iscoes, and in the north attend Ysgol Gwynclw in Pontypool. We recognise, and our neighbouring authorities recognise, the pressure that's likely to come on to those schools in terms of the number of places available. So we're in an ongoing dialogue with Blaenau Gwent, with Powys and with Torfaen to understand what the potential is in kind of, I guess, what you might broadly describe as the heads of the valleys corridor, to look at additional provision. Because in the same way we're working in Ysgol Trefonwy to develop our Welsh learners there, and again in Abergavenny to develop the number of Welsh learners there, our other local authorities are also doing the same. I have this conversation with Councillor Thomas very frequently, and I would have some concerns, I think, about whether it was viable for a single secondary Welsh medium school in Monmouthshire itself. I think in terms of the size of the cohort we would likely to attract, that would be challenging. We would have probably 4-form entry, which isn't very big. So we need to look at how we can collaborate with other local authorities to ensure that those children enjoy the richness of a wide and varied curriculum.
Thank you, Will. And Councillor Garrett, are you happy with that, or any follow-up?
No follow-up, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Will.
Great. So over to you, Councillor Bond.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report. really lots of good work being done, and I can see, well, there's two areas really that I'd like to ask about. One is the data. I think you've alluded to it already, the data on page 103 about the English medium schools and their performance have been lacking in a number of areas versus your target, which you've alluded to a bit. Whether you'd like to expand on that a bit more, I don't know, and that'd be good. And also a question around cost, really, in the current climate, and the fact that we're putting our belts in everywhere in MCC, and I read that the Oval Mono, brilliant that it's opened and it's Welsh money, Welsh Government money, completely understandable, but the revenue then goes onto our budget, and our constraints are that we're not delivering, or we're having to cut back in so many areas which really are already existing. So is this a nice to have? Is it a necessary? Where's the cost benefit analysis versus the other things that we're actually having to cut, and services for people? And so if you could repeat again, I know you've said it already, the benefits of having for the residents, benefit of having Welsh language as your second language or first language, for young people. And I'm not saying that I disagree with it. I'm just saying for the benefit of residents versus the cost. So the total cost that MCC input to maintaining Welsh provision, and I'm not saying I'm against it at all. I'm just saying that there are lots of questions in my area about whether, especially on the border as we are, that there's a lot of money and it's a small group of people relatively. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. It's a broad but an important question, I think, Sharon, and it probably starts with, do we know actually how much is actually spent annually in Welsh language training within education within the county, within our schools, in order to be able to determine whether or not there are benefits that are in proper ratio.
What's the first question? Can you just clarify which data you want me to look at? Is it the annual data about the skills and on page 103, or is it a different?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's all the target hasn't been met. I think you've alluded to it already. I just wondered if there's something else you wanted to add. Thank you.
No, it is very much as I said, that we weren't. I think that the data that we captured before wasn't as accurate as it is now. So that meant that our targets weren't as accurate as they needed to be. And therefore, when we come into the second year, with this set of data, we will be able to show progress, in that area. And I know that there's a lot of work that's going on within the local authority. And as part of our commission that we already have with the EAS, providing training for those skills to be developed further. With regard to the revenue funding and costs, I'm going to hand that one over to Will, if that's okay. Thank you.
Here's an easy one, Will.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So it's a really important question, I think, that this is an area of work which we are undertaking because Council has approved this Welsh and Education Strategic Plan. It's part of National Government's very clear contribution to its 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. So there is a policy directive which we are following with regards to that. In terms of the value for money, we do fund Welsh schools at a very slightly higher rate than English medium, so by about 10% more on teaching costs and by about 15% more in terms of resources. What I would say is that we would educate these children anyway, be that in the English medium or Welsh medium. They have exercised their right to choose where they want to go to school in the language which is of their preference. What's important for us is that we make sure that the choice of school is always a good school and that it's accessible in their local community. It was really important for Monmouthshire that the provision has started in Monmouth, because that is a border area and has traditionally been quite an English-speaking area. But I think actually what we've seen in the last year, as Councillor Garrett remarked, that step from having just one parent come to talk to us about attending the school to 20 this year shows that there is clearly an appetite for children to learn through the medium of Welsh. So it is a very, very slight on cost compared to English medium, but I think in terms of our policy obligations and in terms of the delivery of meaningful choice for our parents, I think that's an appropriate cost that we've recognised.
I suppose, Will, the more difficult aspect to quantify is the benefit. So that's the cost from one perspective, but actually the benefit is it comes in many different forms. But you may want to just respond to that slightly.
Yeah, I think, and Sharon's alluded to this earlier, that there are significant benefits to being in education bilingually. We know that. I think Sharon mentioned the fact it makes you more able to assimilate other languages further on in your career in education. I think it's a really positive thing to make that offer to communities. I think in terms of the benefits, they will be widespread. We're seeing at the moment further collaboration between local authorities, which I think is really positive, because the executive head teacher at Trevunwy is working with us from another school in Caerphilly, so we're seeing that transformation of ideas across borders. We've also worked really well, and Councillor Grocott was right to remark upon the relationship with Welsh Government. They've been able to put links in with the Mithrin organisation, with the Centre for the Learning Welsh Language. They're all working with us to make sure that this is a sustainable area of development. Much of that is to do with how we think about staffing in the future and making sure that broader community skills in Welsh language are promoted and strengthened as well. So I think the benefits will be widespread.
Thank you, Will. And Councillor Bond, you have a follow-up?
I just wanted to say, but totally agree with what you've been saying, but we need to be looking at relative cost and the fact that we're cutting services in so many areas. So even though it's meeting our best practice or our legal requirement or our aims, strategies, we need to be looking at everything differently now because of the situation we're in, I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sharon, for this report. You mention and you note that you're not enough engaged with other authorities in this area with the Welsh language provision, and it's because you sort of feed into two secondary schools. Will sort of seem to indicate that actually that possibly wasn't the case. However, it is also mentioned in the report that Torfaen are not going to take Monmouthshire pupils into their secondary school. Now, bearing in mind, pupils that are now in the system, is that of concern to parents and pupils? So if you could sort of elucidate on that, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. I think Will is quite right. We work in partnership with our schools that we feed into, so both Gwyntlw and Yscoed, and the transition and relationship between our primary schools and the secondary schools is very strong in the main. However, in the one aspect, which is measuring progression, it's very different in every school. So across Wales, all schools are grappling with what progression means and how that looks, and across their clusters they're working together to try and get some continuity of understanding, but because the schools have different ways of going about it, it could be that a school who's in Monmouthshire is working with their cluster within Monmouthshire to develop that way of measuring progress, but it'd be very different in the cluster for Gwyntlw, for example. So to align those two things is quite difficult. If you are a child who's multilingual, who comes into the local authority or into Wales, there is a language acquisition line of progression that you can use, but Welsh Government haven't yet finalised that, and that will help help, because then wherever you are learning Welsh, you will know where you are on that continuum. But at the moment, that's not there. So it's something we're having to do and work with individual schools, which takes a little bit of time to do. So that's the only area of work really where, you know, it isn't as strong as I'd like it to be. We have lots of things in place to ensure that transition between our primaries and secondaries is really effective. So for example, the youth service support year 6 pupils for a whole year, and they have an intensive 6-week programme to enhance that transition from primary Welsh medium into secondary Welsh medium into both of those schools. So there's a lot of work that does go on between them. So yeah, the partnership is strong, but that area needs some improvement.
Thank you, Sharon. Councillor Buckler, you contend?
What about the provision sort of going into secondary school for pupils currently doing primary school education in the Welsh medium? You know, are you concerned that there'll be, you know, a hiatus and problems in getting secondary places for pupils now? Also, can I also pick up on something you said, which is very interesting? Do you think there is a case for some continuity in assessment and standards that should be implemented throughout the different authorities? Thank you.
Sharon.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think I'll take the second part of the question first. As far as looking at continuity with assessment and progression, the curriculum is set up to enable schools to determine that for themselves, because it depends on the curriculum, the context in which they're being taught, and how the schools approach that. I think there is probably a debate about whether that should be set, but at the moment that isn't the case, and schools are working through that. So I think, you know, I don't have a view on that particularly at the moment, because I'm working with schools who are working through that process, and where they're, you know, and they're moving quite well, although it's at different rates in different places in different schools. But it is the way of the curriculum and the way it's set up. So that's the first bit. And regarding places in secondary schools, well, we know that we've looked at projections, and whilst, as Will said, potentially in the future there may be a hiatus, at the moment that isn't a concern to us, because although schools are growing, they're growing from reception upwards. So that's giving us 7 to 8 years to think about that. So those children who are in Welsh medium school, in Ysgol y Ffin and Ysgol y Fenni, there will be no concerns there for the immediate future.
Thank you, Sharon. And just before we move on to the next item, just could I ask what I think would be an informative and relevant comparison? We understand from the report 95% of pupils in English medium schools they're gaining qualifications in Welsh language, which is, I think, very helpful. I think it would be very informative for residents to say, well, how does that compare to any other modern foreign language? So if that's what's being gained as a second language, what proportion, what percentage of pupils in our schools are studying any other language from anywhere else in the world? You know, I think that would help to inform residents somewhat. And I don't expect you to be able to say that off the top of your head. So, Will, you may want to plunge in with that one.
Sorry, Sharon. I was just going to say that I think, unless Sharon's got the actual number to hand, I think it would be, we'll find that information out and come back to you.
Absolutely great. Yeah, fantastic. If you could just let us have that, it would be very helpful. And we'll do that in the follow-up notes. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for a very informative report. It's an awful lot of work that goes in. I hope you appreciate that by asking questions, we're not doubting, and we're certainly not seeking to undermine anything, but we're trying to elucidate and help also our residents understand what we're doing, with a view to actually saying if we can do more and do better, you know. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for the questions, and I move that report. And I see nothing raised as an issue with that. So thank you to Councillor Gokop for attending, and also to Sharon for being here to respond to the questions. We're now going to move on to item number 5, unless Robert says, no, we're not. We're moving somewhere else. No, he's actually he's in agreement, which is helpful.
I've been remarkably confused by switching them around, so I think I've told everyone something slightly different in the course of today. But I think we're just about back on track. So thank you for that.
We do this just to see if everyone's paying attention, so that's good to know. So we're going to move on to what is a very important report, which is the revised reduction strategy for those who are not in education, employment, or training. And just by dint of unpacking that acronym, I would encourage everyone, please, to try and avoid acronyms in the way that we pick up the questions and answers in this report, bearing in mind it's what residents make of this that really makes a great deal of difference. So I'm going to start with just the introduction to the report, and I don't know who wishes to introduce, but Councillor Griffiths, thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I very much agree with you that this is an important topic, strategy for those young people who are not in education, employment or training. It's a small group of people, 1.1, 1.2% of the cohort. The figures are in the report. Nevertheless, whilst a small number, for the individuals involved, the circumstance is life-defining, life-constraining, and we have a responsibility to respond to those circumstances. In terms of the Monmouthshire economy, it might be less than 2%, but it's an economy which is constrained by the lack of labour, and like all local economies, it's our responsibility to maximise economic activity and the ability of people to contribute. In terms of the strategy itself, it may often be the case that a politician, a cabinet member, wants to claim responsibility for initiating, leading, informing the strategy. That's not the case here. Those roles have been provided by Louise Welch, who will be joining the introduction in a moment. Not here today, I understand, because of a COVID infection, but still able to lead us through the discussion. I've offered, I hope, some level of oversight. If there are gaps in the strategy that you spot, the responsibility is probably mine, whereas I hope you find many positive aspects to it. The responsibility is with Louise. So over to Louise.
Thank you, Louise. And just to start, sorry to hear you're unwell, but hopefully not too unwell. And if you feel okay about it, to be able to just take us through some of the most important aspects of the report on the basis that we have read the report and we're trying to just really pick out the really key elements. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies I'm not with you this afternoon. I didn't think you'd like to share my germs, so I stayed away. If I could just go to the screen and share some slides with you, but I will skip along and pick out some of perhaps the discussion around the data specifically. So our draft NEET prevention strategy, can you just confirm you can see the slides are on the screen for me?
Yes, we can, yes.
Lovely, thank you. So our previous strategy was in place until 2020, 2021. You may ask some questions around why it's taken us so long to sort of reinvent and re-update the strategy that was there. We've been through a number of challenges in the past few years. We've obviously been through COVID. We've been through a number of transitions through funding streams, and that's posed a particular challenge for this strategy, as the main prevention work is funded by previously ESF money and currently UK SBF money. However, we are there again, and it just felt that it was more than timely, really, to look at reframing the strategy. So we've been having discussions across the last year with a working group. We've also consulted with our chief officers, our senior leadership team, really to look at that ongoing engagement around the strategy, around shaping the aspiration of the strategy, identifying those priority themes, and also the actions that we will seek to carry out under the strategy. The working group came up with the aspiration, around creating a positive and sustained outcomes for young people through bespoke, productive and meaningful engagement in education, training and employment. And those of you that perhaps have looked further back or have known the youth engagement progression framework and our previous strategy will see that we kept consistency with all bar one of our priority themes. So those are, as I said, aligned to the youth engagement progression framework, which is the Welsh Government framework for young people not in education, employment or training. So this is perhaps some of the key data, and I'm sure on the screen it's not the easiest to read. So hopefully, as you say, you will have been able to look at some of this. Our data around young people, we've got two key sets of data for our work around young people not in education. We have our annual data, which is reflected on the screen at the moment, and that is often referred to as pupil destination data or destination data. We do then also look at this monthly, and we'll also then, through the strategy, will have seen reference to tier data. That tier data is our monthly check in terms of how many young people are not in education, employment or training. The key measure, though, and the measure that often we're scrutinised on, and other colleagues in other local authorities are also scrutinised on, is the annual data. So this is perhaps the headline figures. You'll see it's relatively consistent. There were obviously challenges following COVID where we saw perhaps an increase in year 11s, certainly since COVID, perhaps down to mental health challenges and well-being in the COVID recovery phase. And year 13 was obviously a peak as well, where young people chose not to go to university that year, taking a gap year as part of their plans. So some of the key themes are important to look at for the young people that do become not engaged in education or employment or training. Often there is low or no attendance ahead of their transition. There can sometimes be early disengagement from their pathway, and this might be as part of their post-16 destination, where they've chosen to make a step onwards to college, to a training provider or employment, and have been unable or unwilling to sustain that destination. One of our key challenges in Monmouthshire is that we don't have a level 3 offer. Our young people are unable to access the level 3 offer. And what that means is that young people who are looking to stay in our secondary schools at sixth form may not be at A-level standard. We don't currently have any offers in our secondary schools in sixth forms below that, which is something that we're looking to develop as part of the strategy. Training providers in Monmouthshire are relatively limited, so the quality and the accessibility of those, if that is the chosen pathway for our young people, can be challenging. And of course, there are a small number of missed opportunities where schools, our early identification systems, have not identified young people that have become NEET. Last year, we had a number of young people that didn't hit any of our early identification markers ahead of the year 11 destinations point. And certainly there were no discussions or flags from secondary schools. Almost impossible to change that, but obviously we will seek to see how we can continue to develop our systems. Accountability, something that I'm really keen to do as part of our destinations and the new strategy, is actually perhaps move away from the focus on the annual destination data and have a much more fluid discussion ongoing really around the monthly tier data, about the actual story of the young people that have become NEET, so that we can learn lessons from their stories, but also taking into account that key measure of the destination data also. So it'd be really good to have some discussion with you today around our future targets. I have identified targets for 24 to 26. And those are perhaps aspirational targets based on our current provision, which is a key challenge for us at the moment in terms of that current provision being funded until the end of March 2025 through UK government funding. We don't know currently what's beyond that. So those targets that have been identified as part of the strategy are with a caveat that the funding continues and that we're able to implement some of the strategic projects that we would like to work on as part of the strategy. So the future in terms of the strategy and some of the key parts of the action plan that are in the strategy are around that continuation of our NEET prevention programme. Our NEET prevention programme in Monmouthshire is called Inspire and is an established programme. We would like to work on our level 2 offer in our sixth forms. We're currently working on a STEM programme for Monmouthshire schools with an aspiration that in the future we would be able to develop a skills centre for Monmouthshire. Within the local authority, we're keen to explore work experience, a paid work experience programme, for example. We've previously been involved in a programme called Kickstart, which enabled young people who are currently NEET to access a paid work placement with the local authority. And we're also keen to develop and increase the training and apprenticeship offer for school leavers within the authority. So that's the presentation. I would be grateful for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Louise. That's a good précis of the tables, the numbers, and so on. I noticed you described it as an aspiration and then aspirational targets. Last week, one of our committee members described what an aspiration is like, and I did say at the time that it might be an opportunity to remind them of that, but I noted it down at the time. The description of aspiration was a word used when, frankly, services are not doing very well. Now, do you think our services are doing quite well or less so?
I think we do well. I think so each year, and thank you for the question, each year I will do a piece of work once we pass the destinations count. So destinations count takes place every year, 31st of October. We will, using the data that we've tracked and monitored to look at those destinations, we will unpack the stories of the young people that have become NEET. And I'm being honest, every year there are maybe 2 young people that we could have done better for as a local authority. So aspirationally, I would like to decrease the number of young people that become NEET. There are some young people that have got significant challenges and barriers, and that's where our targeted support is so crucial then. The piece of work that we need to do better on is those young people that have not been identified as potential NEET young people, so not those that had a pathway identified. Those are the areas that I think we can do better on.
Thank you, Louise. I was slightly tongue-in-cheek when I said that. One of the really engaging aspects, I think, and inviting aspects of the report itself is that the numbers within, the actual number of individual people within Monmouthshire who are in this group that we categorise, they don't categorise it, we do, as not an employment, education or training, is not, it's a manageable number. It's a sort of number, that you'd think that we would be able to engage with very, very directly. It's quite an interesting aspect of the context. But let's move into some questions. First of all, Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Louise, and everyone for this report. Really comprehensive, really interesting. You suggested that there's missed opportunities. And a couple were not picked up through looking at the markers, the risk markers maybe. I just wondered what percentage, if you've got the markers on page 21 of indicators then of what might happen later in their educational life. I wonder if there's an opportunity, because they are significant ones that would be with the young person before that time, whether there's an opportunity to look at this before age 7, and because those markers, those life situations will be there then, and wonder whether there's any mental health support, because or like trauma support, help with self-esteem, self-worth, aspiration. You've just used that word, but aspiration in a different way, so that it can overcome those mental barriers, though the rather than just training somebody. If you haven't got the hearts and minds, then there's no good just training, which you're nodding at me, so I'm sure you've thought of that. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for the question, and it's really interesting that you've mentioned and highlighted that sort of pre-year 7 work under our European funded programme. So a few years ago, back to ESF money, we in fact had a year 6-7 transition programme. So that earlier intervention that was identifying young people in year 5 and 6 of primary schools, working with those young people and schools and the families to map ahead, to work ahead in terms of that transition. Unfortunately, when we moved into UK government SBF money, the allocation wasn't as much as we had under ESF. So when we shaped the provision and the programme, that we very much had to look at perhaps the priorities, and it's difficult, isn't it? Do you look at the prevention? So do you focus earlier? One authority that we work with, Merthyr, did, and they maintained an earlier intervention, whereas the majority of other local authorities, ourselves included, focused the support just ahead of the destination, the transition point at post-16, so years 9, 10, 11, and then post-16 provision. So it's really difficult to currently we can't do it all in terms of the money that we've got, but certainly again we've got the early identification tools developed, so that work is done, that is there, that can be used, but we don't currently have funding to push resource in that direction. In terms then of sort of mental health and wellbeing support, the youth engagement progression framework and our strategy is reliant on partners, is reliant on stakeholders. So this is not just about Monmouthshire delivering, so it's not just about our Inspire programme, which is our NEET prevention programme. It's about all of the partners doing their bit under the framework. So within the strategy for Monmouthshire, we will have partners including Careers Wales, schools, youth service, youth offending service, and more, training providers as well, colleges, each with their specialism, so that those young people that are then identified as not engaged in education, employment, or training can have the most appropriate service, because it's not always Inspire, for example. It could be that we broker support in terms of the college, and they put in their preventative programmes because a young person could be wobbling, for example, or training provision under the young person's guarantee. So the framework, the partnership is absolutely crucial to this strategy.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed what you said at the beginning. Where was the funding from initially we've lost?
So European structural funds, so ESF funding was from something, and Hannah might want to come in here, it was 2016 until looking at 2022.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I was just going to check on ESF. I'm going to move on now to Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I must plead guilty to being the councillor who hates the use of that word, aspirational. Although from memory, my explanation was far more subtle than the rather stark summary that the chair has given, and I think I referred to it as being the sort of word used by us politicians rather than officers, but there we go. You refer to there being a link between being neat and being homeless. I wonder if you could dive a little bit deeper into what understanding you have of the nature of a link, which is the primary cause and which is mainly the effect. So I've got 3 questions altogether. I'll be quite quick. You seem to suggest that there are needs in the county that we don't know about, partly because of the information that's coming from the schools. Have we also got any significant number, do you think, who we don't know about because they've moved into the county after the age of 16? I guess that's more of a problem in areas like big cities, which are a bit of a magnet in those sort of circumstances. But I mean, it's a bit of, known unknowns and so on there. But we're interested to know if we have any information about that. And then a bit to turn it onto its head. Those pupils at the age of 16 and 18 who decide they want to go into work, which will be a minority. I think more than 50% will go to university of some sort. Others will go into training. But there are some who want to go directly into work. What do we know about the job market for those people at 16 or 18? What opportunities are there for them?
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. That's okay, Louise. I just want to say that if I don't know how you feel about this, Councillor Strong, but I personally would very much like us not to talk about these people as NEETs, but much more that they. Sorry, I don't mean to criticise, because I've probably used the same expression, because we use the language of acronyms, and the problem with it, from my perspective, is that it categorises people who may have a variety of particular challenges. And I'm not criticising, as I say, I'm sure I've used the same expression, but it would be really good, I think, if we talk about them as people who are in whatever that situation is. And great, some really important questions. So, Louise, sorry for breaking in there, but over to you.
No, thank you. So to look for the first question around those young people not engaged in education, employment or training, the link to homelessness. So to jump back to the Welsh Government Youth Engagement Progression Framework, that was developed many years ago, but refreshed recently. Under the refresh, because of how the work around our provision and the youth homelessness provision was funded, so the youth support grant, they chose to merge the identification tools and the framework. So that was a decision made at Welsh Government. Locally, before that, we had two early identification tools. So we had an early identification tool in place to identify young people who were at risk of homelessness and young people who were at risk of becoming not engaged in education, employment or training once they went through that post-16 destination. In reality, the identification tool was identifying the same young people in terms of those most at risk. So when the Welsh Government key staff looked at, worked with us as local authorities to really collaborate and to discuss whether that was the right step. I think it was. There are a lot of similarities in terms of those early identification markers. If we were to look at attendance, exclusions, looked after status, free school meals, around some of the key markers of our early identification tool that will cross over into the risk of homelessness. So that's been an effective step forward. What it's allowed us to do in terms of the actual prevention work that happens across our not engaged in education, employment or training work and the youth homelessness work is ensure then that collaboration and no duplication happens. So we'll look at each case then, so each young person, what support is already in place for them, and look at the most appropriate provision moving forward through the kind of key transition points. So that's the link across there. In terms then of young people that have moved into the local authority, so I mentioned earlier that we've got the two key sets of data. So destinations data is the data for young people who've been educated in Monmouthshire, but and so who've become not engaged in education, employment or training. Our tier data is for young people that are resident of Monmouthshire. So there are often a small number of differences, and we need to work really hard in those cases to make sure that we've identified them. One of the key markers on the pupil destination data is unknowns, which again is not the nicest of terms as we've referenced in terms of NEAT. Unknowns are where the young person's destination is unknown. So they might not be known to a prevention service, they might not, or it might be as simple as we've been unable to track them through the transition. We work very hard to have as low a number as possible there. Some authorities don't, so there is differences in the approach across the local authorities, but certainly we will work towards a 0% unknown, and are usually fairly close. I hope that's all of the key points, but come back to me if I haven't.
Yeah, those who go who want to go directly into work, the
Thank you.
to those. Yeah.
Of course. So each year we do see a number of young people that will go into employment, and again, pupil destinations data will identify the different categories, so we're able to see the numbers that have gone into employment. What we do see is relatively low numbers currently of apprenticeships as next steps, and that's part of something we'd really like to continue to develop under the strategy moving forward. The young people that go into straight employment, unfortunately, it's often low skilled and low paid roles. We see a lot going into construction, into service roles, so retail, and not always as a sort of a career pathway as such, but a short-term, low-paid employment. So again, always part of our work in terms of post-16 is that upskilling element of the work as well. And so we've got qualification centres as part of the team that will be able to deliver qualifications in the aim of upskilling and ensuring the young people are in the most appropriate and best possible position we can get them in terms of their qualifications.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Strong. Thank you, Louise. Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair. Does Councillor Strong want to come back on any of that first?
Thanks. Yeah, just very quickly, I note your reference to apprenticeships there. Clearly, for all sorts of reasons, it's going to be important to increase the number of apprenticeships in various areas. That will be a matter only partly for MCC, but mainly for the Welsh Government and indeed Westminster. It would seem to be central to this growth strategy. Okay, so thanks for that reference. Thank you.
Thank you, and Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Louise. Actually, your fulsome replies have been so good that a lot of things I've been thinking of, you've already answered. Sort of really touching upon what you've been talking about and identifying these young people who are in danger of having, this situation when they leave school where they're adrift. What would you say, and you mentioned, listening to their stories, would be factors that would sort of flag up to people? Because a lot of people might not sort of realise sort of what might seem insubstantial is actually a really red flag for young people. So, sort of what would you say would identify a young person at risk? It might be helpful for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you for the question. So our early identification tool is an established tool that is our go-to, if you like, in terms of rating the young people's risk. So it'll identify red, amber, green. The indicators that we look at as part of that are indicators such as attendance. So poor attendance is one of the primary ones. I mentioned earlier we will also look at things like exclusions, looked after status, free school meals, school moves actually is one as well, and academic levels. If in terms of the learning and the actual cases that come through in terms of those young people, the identification tool is only part of the story. It allows us to benchmark, I suppose, and put in an established benchmark for those young people and the risks, but it's the it's the partnership then between stakeholders, so schools, ourselves, other key providers that work across our schools, counselling services, social services. It's that fluid and ongoing conversation that perhaps will then identify often perhaps other things that are going on for that young person in terms of the risk of their disengagement. So it's crucial, that conversation, and that's why the model that we use in Monmouthshire currently is to have one of our workers based in each of the secondary schools. So whilst they're part of the NEET prevention programme and staff team, they'll be based in secondary schools to allow consistent contact both for the young person that is accessing the support, but then also the stakeholders that wrap around our provision, and it enables us to sort of move really quickly and positively when those young people perhaps flag or there are things going on for those young people. We also, as you would expect, sit on relevant panels in terms of Operation Quartz, so risk of exploitation, crime and disorders and strike process, so that we can advocate for the young people that we work with on our caseloads and make sure that, again, we're up to date and sort of very aware of the risks that they are going through at that point in time. Have I answered your question? I have waffled a little bit then.
No, you did it beautifully. Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Louise. Yeah. My question just really was, you've already mentioned that the funding is running out in March 2025. I'm just curious, I'm concerned, I'm sure you are concerned as well, that what's going to happen post 2025, March 2025. Do we have measures in place that this work continues? And my second question, which I think has already been covered really, is the strategy helping to address root causes of young people becoming not in education, employment or training? But listening to what you've been saying today, I think you've picked all the points that, or the red flags, as Councillor Blackett mentioned, picking these children up. So thanks. Just a one question then, really.
Thank you, Councillor House. So about the funding up until March 2025, and I guess, if we could give you a crystal ball for Christmas, Louise, then you'd be very pleased with it, to be able to see beyond that. Very challenging.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I'm actually going, and I think I can see Hannah poised on the speaker, so I'm going to pass over to Hannah on this one, please.
Hannah.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for the question. It is short-term funding, as you're aware. We were in a space where we had European funded, and then that morphed into a shared prosperity fund. The funding is till March 2025, as you all know. It is a challenge. We're waiting for outcomes of the autumn budget statement on the 30th of October this month, as is every authority in the UK. The programme we've run for some time. It is successful in terms of supporting our young people into a sustainable destination. So it is at a point where we've presented the strategy, and I think I'm picking up on that aspiration. I suppose in our head, that aspiration of setting that target is quite governed by the funding that comes from the 1st of April 2025. We are looking at ways that we can reach out to look at funding we have from Welsh Government and other sources as well, but ultimately going forward, it is going to be a significant impact on the local authority if the SBF funding comes to an end from the 31st of March. So I'm sorry, that is the line really at the moment.
Councillor Griffiths, did you want to come in on that particular point?
Yeah, the issue that's raised is clearly an important one. We have a significant number of programmes which are important but grant funded with no permanent funding stream. There's a history and a potential future that these programmes have to live with moving from cliff edge to cliff edge, and that must be worrying and demotivating for both the users of the service and the providers of the service. the way in which I've approached it as a cabinet member in relationship with the people working on these programmes is to say, let's all work on the basis that this funding can continue. We may have contingency plans, but our main assumption should be that these are good quality programmes providing for real needs. Let's keep our concentration on continuing that programme. As Hannah has said, we anticipate some clarity with the budget statement at the end of this month, and what I've tried to do is to work with people on the basis that this programme is going to continue until we know otherwise, and let's look for that clarity when it arrives. So I've intervened there, and it sounds a bit garbled, but I hope you can see my point is that I haven't wanted those involved to focus on the what if. I wanted them to focus on continuing their good work, and that's I think the best way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. And we asked actually at the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee of the 8th last Tuesday, recognising the number of grant-funded roles on short-term grants, annual grants that we have as a local authority, just to get some perspective on what the scale of that was. And I know that's something that officers are going to let us know. Councillor House, were you content with that?
Yeah, I think just to really say that, obviously there's a cost effectiveness of a programme like this as well, to keeping those figures low. So, to account for that, I wouldn't know how to start, but I appreciate the great work you're doing. So thank you. I hope the funding does come available.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry, and I was just actually going to say, for any resident watching, Hannah, who responded at first, is Hannah Jones, the Head of Economy, Employment and Skills, in case any resident is watching and doesn't know Hannah. Maybe many residents watching who are very familiar with you, Hannah. I'm going to move on to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the questions and thoughts that I've had have been answered already. Some really good questions, actually. Well done, team. And some really good answers as well.
That's what we do here, Councillor Butler.
So, particular thanks to Louise and Hannah. I suppose having been a teacher in pupil referral and being currently the mother of a 19-year-old, I have a really, really good idea of how difficult it is in, sort of assessing where the destinations are of our young people. And I think, you're doing fantastic work, really. It's all about destinations, I know, but I think somebody's already said something about if you drop out of a destination. How do we track them then? Do they come back to us? How do they come back to us? And the other thing I'm going to ask, this is not just for years 11, 12 and 13. It goes beyond that. It goes, we have young people then, and I think somebody's already said about half of our young people go off to university. But sadly, a certain percentage of those will drop out in the first or second year. Do they come back to us? How do we track those? What are we doing with those, really? So that's my two questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you. So the information in terms of how we track them, the systems up to 16 are excellent. Our functions in place to monitor 16 plus are there. The information is only as good as the information fed into the systems. So this is where we rely on the relationships and the stakeholders that are engaged. So if a young person would present to us, for example, would come directly through our referral pathways or through our website, or however they find their way back to us, we would then flag into the system. And it's a Careers Wales data system that manages all of this data, so all of the destinations data and all of our tier data. But likewise, if a young person hadn't sustained their destination and had dropped out of college, had dropped out of employment, they depending on where the destination has been, that provider should be flagging to us that young person has dropped out and not sustained. So there's a number of ways, but it is crucial that all of our stakeholders and partners adhere to the processes that are in place to make sure that they're flagged and captured then on our system. So if we look at our monthly keeping in touch meeting, we have a monthly keeping in touch meeting that looks specifically at the tier data. So it looks at those and names the young people that are currently not engaged in education, employment or training in Monmouthshire. We also have a function as part of that meeting for our partners to flag any young people that have not been listed, but who have become NEET in that month. And so that we will then make sure that they're captured, because that allows us then to look at support that we can offer them, look at starting and building that conversation. In terms of 19 plus, we have our colleagues in terms of Job Centre Plus and our adult employment and skills provision, who, if a young person comes in and who has not been able to sustain their placement and is beyond 19 and has become not engaged in anything in terms of education, employment or training, we then have projects that they'll be able to access support. Depending on the circumstances of what support is available, everything from support to do their employability skills, to access training, qualifications, so very similar to the provision that we deliver at pre-19, but obviously more targeted and funded slightly differently in some circumstances as well.
Thank you, Louise and Councillor Butler. Any particular follow-ups?
Thank you very much for that, Louise. So if they've gone to a scenario now, if they've gone to university in England, they've come back, if they go to the job centre, does that sort of like spark the follow-up? Or what about if they just go into they start working in a bar or something? Would being employment then not flag anything up?
No. So if in that scenario a young person had dropped from their destination, had come back into Monmouthshire, if they haven't reached out and made contact with a support agency, then they won't be flagged. In terms of the framework for the youth engagement progression, it goes up to 19. Once they're beyond that, minimises the requirement to track. There is support there for them, though, and that is important that we say that, but it would take that young person to access it via a variety of stakeholders to be able to access that support.
Thank you very much for that.
And thank you, Louise. Thank you, Councillor Butler. If I may, before we move the report and we move on to the next item, one of the things that's very, very noticeable about the discussion and the responses that we've just had is just the extent to which, Louise and Hannah, you've brought to life an awful lot of what we do. And one of the things that we're always asking our officers across the authority bringing reports is to please always think this is for residents. What does a resident get from any report? What do they learn? Is it accessible? Does it tell it? Does it tell the story? Does it provide information in a way that is accessible? And I'm really glad we've had the opportunity. Also very appreciative, given that you've got COVID. So I can only imagine how you would respond even more so when you're without being under the weather. But it's just really to say, please, 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 as we ask other officers, please try and bring to life the report in a summary form that any resident might read and actually sit down and say, you know what, I really got a lot out of one page. That just brings out such important information, brings it to life. And if they really want to proceed into looking at tables and charts and some of the drier information that sometimes we need to produce for statutory reasons, but not always, then they can do so. But it's just so important what you do and what colleagues in that whole area do that, I'd really encourage that. Just one other point, if I may, or point stroke question. Last week we were looking at reports that indicated that care leavers, 47% move straight into not being employed, educated or being trained. And it just struck me how that's not one of your key issues. And when I was looking at the key issues, it did strike me that they're almost written as key issues pointing inwardly towards us as a council. Have we got our strategy right? Have we got the processes of the strategy right? Rather than actually, what are the key issues that are the challenges, the opportunities, the possibilities in terms of tackling the barriers for those people who are not in education, employment, or training. And I just wonder if we've got the balance of those things right. I completely get we need to have our processes and our strategies where we want them, but surely it's what we do to the outside world that really makes a difference, and perhaps those are the key issues, not the points that we might have right now. But please take that in a constructive way. It's certainly intended to be so. So thank you. I'm going to move the report, and I see no further issues on it. And I'm also going to just break for a couple of minutes because we're trying to just make sure, as we've changed around the agenda, that we've got the officers and cabinet members here that we need for item number 4. So I'm going to say, would it work for everybody if we took 3 minutes and we get back directly after that? Hopefully that works. So we'll get back together again at 15:45. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to restart, and we're moving straight into the item which we flipped around to the latter part of the agenda, so thank you for allowing us to do that, which is the socially responsible procurement strategy. It's an important strategy and an important report, so I'm going to first of all ask, I don't know, Councillor Brocklesby, did you want to introduce the report, or did you wish to move straight through to officers?
Very briefly, Chair. Very briefly, Chair, I will move over to officers. This strategy, as colleagues will know, it's developed around two pieces of legislation, one Welsh and one UK, and was a responsibility of all councils to get in place post 2021-2022. It's therefore being embedded across the country, the UK and Wales. So it is a work in progress. It's a work in progress where we're learning practice from the configuration that we talk to here, Ardell, but also from learning from previous procurement frameworks and also what other councils are doing, both in Wales and elsewhere. So I think, obviously we come every year, but this is a timely moment to reflect and to think what changes we might need to make, or where we can learn from others and how we can adapt. And that was always the purpose of this strategy, to ensure that learning was embedded within it as we went forward. So I'll hand over to the officers.
If I may, Councillor Brocklesby, just to say to residents, Councillor Brocklesby is the leader of the council, and I'm grateful that you were able to join us, because I know you've had something of a fraught day in different ways. If flat tires and nails and tires are part of having a fraught day. But if I could ask officers, could you please introduce yourself at the first point that you speak, and if you assume that we have read the report, so what we're looking for is really key issues that you might want to draw out, and we'll move then straight into questions. So over to you.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. So I'm Gemma Ellis, the Interim Head of Commission and Procurement for Ardell. So I'd just like to take you through some of the key points of the report. The intention is to provide committee with a balanced update on progress, achievements, challenges, and as well as priorities for the coming year. The procurement performance update covers the past 16 months. Socially responsible procurement strategy was approved in June 2023 and spans the next 5 years and aligns with the Community and Corporate Plan and is informed by the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, the Welsh Procurement Policy Statement and the new Procurement Act, which is due to come into force in February 25. This strategy has seen a departure from the traditional local government strategies, where the focus was primarily on cost and quality. Socially responsible requirement now reflects the importance of economic, environmental and social factors when making our procurement decisions, with an emphasis on fair labour practices, environmental sustainability, diversity and inclusion, as well as community wellbeing initiatives within the 7 strategic objectives documented within the strategy. So just a little bit of background. Until August 2021, the procurement function across the council was made up of just 2 FTEs. Through the delegated agreement to enter into the Ardell partnership, we now have access to 6 FTEs.
Sorry, Gemma, could you just, beg your pardon for interrupting, but FTEs, not everyone watching this will necessarily know. If you could possibly avoid acronyms. Thank you.
Full-time members of staff. Apologies. So we now have 6 full-time members of staff who provide advice, guidance and support across all categories of spend, as well as a strategy officer who leads on the development and implementation of procurement strategy, policy, procedures, process, guidance and training, data analytics and supporting technology. There's a dedicated procurement professional support is given to all external procurements in excess of £75,000. Any spend below this threshold is supported by guidance documents and staff training. In 2023-24, the Council's third-party spend was approximately £152 million, spent with 2,754 suppliers. So just to give you a bit of an outline of some of the key challenges we faced within the Ardell service recently, well, within the past 16 months. Recruitment and retention has been a particular challenge for us and has impacted our pace of change. The pending introduction of the new Procurement Act, as well as the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act Wales, has refocused our resources with work needed to amend policies, procedures and practices in preparation to implement the necessary changes. This work required to adapt to the new procurement legislation has ensured that we need to embed these requirements within our documents and has given us the opportunity to address inconsistencies across the Ardell partnership within our governance documents, including the development of a standardised set of contract procedure rules, an operational buying responsibility guidance and staff training, as well as the introduction of pre- and post-tender award reports that provide assurances that procurement outcomes are aligned with legislation and council priorities. And this work continues with the development of the socially responsible procurement policy, our contract forward plan, and the Council's contract register, which will better inform and promote opportunities for local SMEs and across our supply chains. So just would like to highlight some of the key achievements we have managed within Ardell over the past 16 months. In terms of governance, we now have a better understanding of our third-party data spend, and the ability to report findings. 118 officers undertook contract procedural training to enhance their understanding of the Council's existing rules, and 60 officers recently attended the knowledge drop sessions on the new Procurement Act. Work has also started on the development of the new collaborative contract procedure rules, which is going to be a really important piece of work that reflects the commitments made within the community and corporate plan and the socially responsible procurement strategy, as well as the new pending procurement legislation. The introduction of the pre-tender reports, as I previously mentioned, and the contract award reports have provided greater visibility of decision making. Within the past 12 months, we've processed 30 pre-tender reports and contract award reports with a value of approximately 64 million. So looking at the Council's drive to achieve carbon net zero. We've got Scope 3 emissions, which has been baselined in conjunction with Welsh Government guidance. Climate change and carbon reduction procurement guidance has been developed to reflect buy-in responsibly guidance, the need to embed appropriate selection and award criteria in our tender documents, as well as the requirement on suppliers to produce carbon reduction plans for procurements in excess of 5 million. We're also working closely with RAP Cymru to look at opportunities to share knowledge and pilot projects. Our existing contract procedure rules places a commitment on budget holders to seek competition from local suppliers when procuring. We're developing a draft socially responsible procurement policy, which is primarily an external-facing document, providing guidance to those who work with us to better understand our expectations and requirements. And we've developed our contract register and contract forward plan, which are progressing really well in line with the Sell into the Council guide, which will be redrafted again in early 2025. We've now got a dedicated social value lead officer who's been reappointed, and we are currently looking at piloting where we can embed social value initiatives on a green waste tender. We've just procured a social value software system to help us capture and manage social value delivery through our contracts. And our economy, employment and skills team are in discussions with the procurement team and social value lead to ensure that socially responsible procurement policy complements the work that they have planned. So then just quickly going on to some of the priorities we're looking at for the next 12 months. a further drive on recruitment to fill our vacant posts. We'll be looking to continue to invest in training for procurement staff, as well as putting policy into practice. We'll be continuing to work with a partnership with the University of Wales via the student placement programme, which has been hugely successful for us. We currently have 10 people working within the team who came through that programme, so it just goes to show how successful that has been. We'll be continuing to develop and look at opportunities to develop new technologies to automate our processes, which will make us more efficient as a service. In terms of process and governance, we'll be looking to agree and align our process and governance arrangements mentioned previously, our contract procedure rules. This will optimise the partnership's collective performance. We'll be continuing to promote the importance of data to drive our outcomes and challenge behaviours. We'll be looking to improve our communications by offering further knowledge drop sessions for service areas across the council, particularly on social value and carbon reduction initiatives. We've continued to work in collaboration with RAP Cymru. I mentioned this previously. We're looking at some particular pilot projects to look at carbon reduction initiatives within social care, food and highway sectors. And we'll be continuing to promote ARDL, climate change and carbon reduction best practice. We'll be looking to work with all interested stakeholders to examine the potential of the creation of the social value delivery group and continue to identify opportunities to embed social value through reviewing the council's contract forward plan. We'll also be progressing discussions on the real living wage accreditation and the modern slavery statement shortly should be due to be approved, and therefore we'll need to be looking at the actions to implement that. And I'll pause there now if you want to ask any questions.
Thank you, Gemma, and very well said and very clear. So thank you very much for that. One of the points that might be worth considering is what we frame as achievements. It might be better for us to be thinking of achievements in terms of the outside world, not within the council, not within the world of local government, but actually the outcomes of the work that is done in terms of our communities, in terms of the end point. These might be achievements. When I was just noting down a few of the achievement points about governance and training and development of contractual procedures, sharing knowledge, driving and recruitment. These are all, they strike me as very important, but they're more perhaps about process, and that's more about progress, but actually to what end, which might be the achievement. So it might be something that we could think of in terms of how we, if we explain what we do to residents, they probably say, well, actually, okay, but what does it all add up to? What's it doing? And that would be a way of, I suppose, answering the question, the achievements. But I'm going to open it to questions, and first of all, Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, sort of following on, really, from your sort of points about what does it actually mean in the end for residents? You know, what value for money are they getting from this collaboration? You know, what, having gone into this collaborative procurement partnership, you know, what benefits can you see, and do you feel it's a better way of working? Are there problems with the way different authorities operate, whether historically or now, and are you working towards all authorities sort of working in the same vein? You would sort of, obviously this is important, being socially responsible as a procurement process, and is now sort of cast in legislation as well, which is all good. But you know, what structure do you feel that, you know, is it giving us value for money? You are very sort of clear on the fact that you want local contractors to be bidding and getting work for in the area, which is great. And there has been in the past a sort of drive just to do the sort of lowest bid, which is not always the best, is as anecdotal and proof in the pudding as well. We all know there are situations where that shouldn't have happened. And how are you tying it up with the being socially responsible, making sure we get good value? I keep going back to this good value, but I think that's sort of critical, isn't it? That we want whatever project is being done, it's got to be done well and be good value for residents. So that would be very helpful to hear your views. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gemma, did you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I'm happy to make a start with. I'm sure
it might be a joint response. Yeah.
Just initially, then to start with, in terms of extreme budget pressures for all local authorities at the moment, we feel collaboration and working together really is the only way to be able to address some of the difficulties we've got out there at the moment. In terms of what that means for residents is, by offering a more efficient service and collaborating wherever we can, we feel we'd be delivering better outcomes, particularly in line with our social value initiatives and community wellbeing objectives, which are directly affecting our local communities. And this is specifically John's area, which I'm assuming he might want to talk about a little bit more, but that is a huge drive for us at the moment. We really looking to deliver better community wellbeing benefits across all of the Ardell councils.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you. I think coming back to the point...
John, could you introduce...
Sorry, yeah, I'm John Paxton. I'm the Strategy and Development Manager within the procurement team for Ardell. So promoting this wider wellbeing agenda, I suppose, translating it into policy. I think coming back to your first point, it's almost like we're constructing a building. We're getting the foundations right. We've done the site evaluation. So a lot of the things that we've done to date in terms of the policy, the strategy, they're standardizing the rules. They're going to stand us in massively good stead. In 2025, I think, we should be off to a kind of flying start as we embed a lot of this stuff. So in terms of the wellbeing agenda, promoting carbon reduction, obviously we've done a lot of work on a regional basis as Ardell. We've led the development of a carbon reduction plan guidance, which the 10 councils in the Cardiff Capital Region have adopted. So this is great, not just for officers, but it's fantastic for the market because it really signifies what the 10 councils are going to do, so helps the market plan for the future in terms of carbon reduction is going to be a key part of the procurement process for all of these 10 councils. At the moment, we're only asking for carbon reduction plans in tenders above 5 million, but the aim is to bring that down to 1 million and lower. But we don't want to, I suppose, we're mindful of the need to not disadvantage local businesses, maybe smaller businesses who haven't got this expertise at the time. So we want to give them time to develop that expertise. We're trying to work with organisations like Business Wales, RAP Cymru to put that in place. In terms of the real living wage, we've done lots of great work within Cardiff, and yeah, it's great to hear that Monmouthshire's looking to progress becoming accredited. Certainly within Cardiff, that's had a huge impact in terms of probably an extra £80 million has gone into the local economy over the last 10 years as a result of people being uplifted to the real living wage. But this relationship is truly collaborative. We're getting some great ideas from Monmouthshire, Torvine, the Vale of Glamorgan. We've all got different pockets of expertise. And, particularly on the carbon agenda, we need as much support as possible in terms of, it's a fast evolving area. And that's why, the project that we're kicking off with RAP Cymru is quite exciting, looking at food, highways and social care homes, both adults and children's, just looking at the opportunities to do things differently in terms of reducing carbon, but also planning for the future and climate change and the mitigations that we have to put in place. So real opportunity, and the aim would be maybe to bring people in from some of the universities as well to challenge our thinking in terms of what is actually possible.
John, can I possibly just remind you of what the questions are about? So the questions were about value for money and any evident benefits. Is it a better way of working? And secondly, about local contractors and maintaining that in the mix.
In terms of the local contractors then coming to that straight away, I think the new Procurement Act, which goes live on the 24th of February next year, provides an opportunity for below threshold tenders, so that's for goods and services below around the £215,000 mark, to potentially just advertise that to local suppliers. But we want to maintain a level of competition. Coming back to your point about value for money, we need competition to be sure that we are delivering value for money. But I suppose as part of the development of the tender, we're looking at value for money, we're looking at quality, but we're also looking at well-being, and then that tender would be evaluated against those three criteria.
Thank you. And Councillor Buckler, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Brocklesby, I know you were trying to come in.
There's a couple of things there, thank you, Chair. There was a couple of things there, thank you, Chair. One is to remind the public who's listening in that we do actually already pay a living wage. We're moving towards accreditation, and to be strictly fair, that came in prior to this administration. It has been long a commitment of this council, as has over the last 2 years to develop the way we're working, which is why it's useful that we moved to Ardell. We had previously worked with Torvine. By working together, of course you get the economies of scale, but you also get the transfer of knowledge and a wider group of expertise. So the numbers, to some extent, speak for themselves, to go from a small number up to 6 full-time working for us and the other councils. I think because we don't often think about procurement, do we? It's the chassis under the car rather than the car. Many of us don't realise that to actually keep staff, recruit, hire and train them within local authority is extremely difficult. Not just across local authorities, but within the public sector, because we're not competing on a level playing field, and the remuneration and packages that you can have in the private sector, if you're a procurement expert, are huge in comparison. So we train, and Cardiff, which is one of the things we wanted to learn, Cardiff had links with universities in order to bring people through on training schemes, keep them there. Honestly, they don't stay that long. So working in partnership means we have access to expertise for longer. And that is important, because I think our residents want to know that the team that we have in place that is buying for us is competent, has the expertise, has the networks that they need to ensure that we can reach out for value for money. The second point, which I think has been made in the Chamber and elsewhere during the process of developing this strategy, is that previous frameworks had been very difficult for micro businesses and local SMEs to compete on the same level playing field as larger companies. So there are times when you had unintended consequences when you went out for bids. What we're learning as we go along, as a council and in partnership with Ardell, is that it is perfectly possible to develop processes where the playing field is more level, but also without contravening regulations in any way whatsoever, encouraging a different way of doing procurement, which is socially embedded, ethically responsible, also looking at decarbonisation, by asking different type of questions under the framework that John suggested. So, for example, about how you would link with schools to educate, how you would link in the public sector to educate. What links do you have along your supply chain so that you can keep it more local or more ethical? And I would remind colleagues listening that local does not necessarily mean ethical and vice versa. So we have to balance what we're doing across this piece. And that comes back to your point, Councillor Butler, about ensuring that there is quality. And I'll give one example. It was procured before our partnership with Ardell, but under very similar values, and that's the hub at Magor. I don't know if any of you have visited the hub at Magor, but that was a fabulous piece. It's a beautiful piece of architecture. It was built with a firm that went out of its way to ensure that there would be apprenticeships and that would go into schools to encourage girls and boys, specifically girls, but boys too, to take up STEM subjects and to act as an intern during that process. And that's the kind of thing which we are continuing as we go on. So you get an indirect impact from that socially responsible procurement, but you also get a visible sign within your community of what it means if you have intelligence, thoughtful and socially responsible procurement. Another example would be the 3 to 19 school in King Henry, which will be the first net zero school in Wales. That too has done its best to ensure that the supply chains are local but also ethical, has worked closely with schools, has worked closely with colleges, and has left behind a living legacy of sponsoring a GCSE course on building and construction. I think I've got the right name of it, and provided the materials to start off the specialist room to do that. And that's, I think, where you can point to procurement making a difference. It's much more difficult when you're talking about the procurement of toilet rolls across the whole of the council, because it depends on what you're procuring. I'm not trying to be facetious there, but there are certain procurement processes where you can see impact, and another where what you want is value for money.
Okay, Councillor Brocklesby, thank you for that. And I could see, Scott, you were looking to come in as well. If you could just introduce yourself too.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Scott James. I'm Monmouthshire's Strategic Procurement Manager. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor Buckland made with reference to promoting local opportunities. I think if I was, as a member of the public, I think there are three key strands for me, and I think it's about understanding what the council's intentions are from an expenditure perspective over the next 12 to 18 months. So that'll take the form of a forward work programme that'll be live and on the council's website, and it will give details of all pending procurements over that time span. There'll also be a copy of the council's contracts register that will give you the finite detail of the contracts that we've currently got in situ, when they start and when they end. And then I think finally for me, it's that endorsement and promotion of the socially responsible procurement policy itself, where we can work with economy and skills and enterprise to actually look to promote what is important to Monmouthshire, and I guess from my perspective, so that the businesses within Monmouthshire and Gwent and Cardiff Capital Region and the English border counties can actually see what it is that's within our procurement strategy. What we're about in terms of delivering the 7 key strategic procurement priorities, and then what it is we require from them to make sure that those outputs are real and that we then end up delivering better value for money.
Thank you. And Councillor Buckler, did you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Scott. That was so helpful to put it down in such a way that residents will be completely understand that, and local businesses will understand your process. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And moving on to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you both Gemma and Scott for your presentations so far. For the benefit of our residents, my understanding is that ARDL, I'm not sure if ARDL is actually an anagram, but perhaps somebody will let me know. ARDL, an acronym, sorry. It's been a long day. An acronym, sorry. But my understanding is it's a mutually beneficial delegation agreement with Cardiff, Torfaen, Vale of Glamorgan, and over the region there are 40 full-time equivalent people employed, and 6 of those are in Monmouthshire. Yeah? Okay. My question really is how are these people funded? Are they all funded by their authorities, or are some of them grant funded? I'm asking really because I've concerns. Sometimes when people are funded, their contracts are very short, and I'm concerned really about sort of continuity of staffing. So I was wondering whether you could let me know a little bit about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Who wants to pick that up?
Thank you. Yes, I'll make a start. So we've got quite a complex, well, I wouldn't say complex, but unusual funding model for ARDL, where we've got contributions from each of the 4 local authorities, and also we lead and manage 3 collaborative frameworks, which bring a levy income, is called, which supports part of the team as well, and they are really 3 successful collaborative frameworks, one all used across Wales. So one is for buildings, one is for highways maintenance, and one is for professional services. So they are really key to the funding within the team as well.
Councillor Butler?
So are the 6 full-time equivalent employees secure, or are they on short-term contracts? Or
they're all secure.
Thank you.
Just on that particular issue, and to extend the question, would these 40 people who are employed and no doubt doing really good work, 6 within the local authority, would they be in addition to those that we would have employed anyway? Do we have any measure of that? Because 40 is quite a large, if you like, mini organisation in itself. Have they replaced roles that used to, the 6 replaced roles that used to exist within the local authority, or are they in addition? What's the answer?
I think it's a different funding model. So all the funding maintains this team as a going concern. So we're all full-time employees. Most of us are employed by Cardiff. Some are employed by the Vale, Torfaen, Monmouth, and they form part of that whole team. So it's a way of maintaining that expertise within the team, I suppose, for the good of ARDL. And ARDL means region or regional in Welsh.
Ah, right, okay, that clarifies that matter. Thank you for that.
So John, the question really wasn't so much that, but it was, is the additional 6 for Monmouthshire, or the 6 roles in Monmouthshire, are they in addition to the roles that we have already had, or are they replacing roles that we've had?
As I understand it, they're not 6 people, but they're access to the equivalent of 6. So you'll have some of my time, some of Gemma's time, and whoever is needed to do what Monmouth requires. So it could be any of, well, not any, but it's probably any of those 30 staff maybe we draw on to provide that service.
Councillor Brocklesby, do you want to just briefly come in on that?
Just quickly, Chair. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I don't know the exact date when Monmouthshire combined with Torfaen. and our procurement services were based in Holbein. Do you know?
Chair, Leader, could you talk into the mic, please? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bond, sorry. I'm just checking with James the date when Torvine and Monmouthshire combined services.
To the best of my understanding, Leader, it's the delegated agreement is with Cardiff.
No, prior to going into Ardell, we were
Oh, no, sorry, the previous iteration of the procurement operating model in Monmouthshire was that there were 2 full-time equivalents dedicated to Monmouthshire. Torvine had their separate, they were in isolation, if you know what I mean. They were never part of a joint arrangement with Monmouthshire.
So for some time we've not had procurement officers based within the county, Councillor Butler. We've been working because it's streamlined. It makes sense to combine services. The opportunity for Ardell was to increase our reach, as Ardell describes as a region.
Thank you, and thank you for the question, Councillor Butler. So, Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gemma, John, Scott, and Mary-Ann. Thank you. There's great work being done. You can tell that, and I can see the benefits of working together, the best practice, the expertise sharing, and everything. It's really good. So I've got 3 questions, please. So the first one is particularly about Monmouthshire. So it says on page 1 that is it on page 1? Yes, the consultants' costs were about 1.27 or whatever, 1.3 million, and I understood from the budget that we're on 4 million. So have I misunderstood something, and what was the difference in those values, please? Secondly, following on from Councillor Butler's request for information, it says on page 7, securing value for money and managing demand. Continue to promote Power BI. And I only know of BI as business interruption, but I don't know what that means. BI spend and improvement, I guess, business improvement maybe, and compliance data to SLT and directorates, and continue to review and refine governance and procedures to promote value for money outcomes. So that's due on March 2025, but nowhere else do I see, and I guess it's in that document, nowhere else do I see anything about securing value for money and managing like audits, quality assurance audits, checking balances, right first time, fit for purpose, any of those performance measures against any of those contractors, and how then that feeds back into, will you use them again? What's their, are they top tier contractors, or you've said about the hub and whatever, what history, what information you have to say that you've evaluated, or even asked the residents of Monmouthshire whether it was fit for purpose and delivered what was right for the people in Monmouthshire. So that's 2. It's about evaluation. And the third one was, could you explain what a contract forward plan is? I know what I might think it is, but I've been a project manager, but on page 19, and that's due late 2024. So what's the progress of that, please, and what does that mean, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And again, who wants to start picking up those?
Thank you. I'll make a start in terms of the question regarding performance of contractors. Contract management is a huge area that we really want to improve. It's not done very well anywhere at the moment. Some areas of the council and the other Ardell councils are doing it better than others, and that is definitely an area where we need to focus on. It's a particular area under the new Procurement Act as well, where we need to strengthen contract management, and all those KPIs that you're talking about, fit for purpose, are they performing well? This all needs to be looked at as well under the new Act. So that's a really good point. We've got we have got some templates in Cardiff that we use for contract management, which we would like to do more work on and look at across the other local authorities as well. But I completely take your point. It is in some areas it's being done well, and where it is being done well, we need to learn from those areas and then improve in other areas. I can answer the contract forward plan one as well. So our contract forward plan is all about our forward pipeline of work. So the service, when a service area has a requirement to spend money, that contract requirement will go on the forward plan with an anticipated value and date, which then not only prepares the market and the suppliers out there for what is to come, it also helps us resource within the Ardal procurement team to make sure that we are ready and prepared to help the service areas to put their tender documents together and support as best as we possibly can. So the more advanced warning and knowledge that we've got, and the population of that contract forward plan is really a critical piece of work for us. I hope that clarifies those points.
Councillor Bond.
Councillor Bond?
Sorry, Councillor Bond. I'll pick up on the Power BI one, if I may.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. The Power BI, to the best of my knowledge, is a Microsoft application. So we use some software called Atomis. It's a bit of software that's been procured via Welsh Government, and it allows us to have discipline on our spend. So basically what happens is all of the spend then goes into what they call a pro-class categorisation. So all of the monies that we spend across Monmouthshire then are put into 7 or 8 different categorisations of spend. The Power BI then interrogates that data and allows then for financial report and other reporting provision to then be given to, well, ultimately to SLT, to heads of service, to anybody, I guess, to allow anybody to challenge spend. So basically to make sure whether the spend is compliant. It also identifies contract leakage. There are other areas that probably John is a little bit better together on, in terms of some of the carbon emissions that you can potentially report on via Power BI. So it's a whole host of metrics that basically allows us to challenge our spend and to ensure that as much of it as possible is compliant.
Thank you. John, did you want to add to that?
In terms of the Power BI, yeah, just quickly, there's a lot of stuff that goes in at the back end, but the front end is a very simple and easy to use report for, well, it's aimed at managers and councillors, so you can see where you're spending your money, how much you're spending. It will give you information about local spend, carbon footprints. You can see where the carbon hotspots are, and it enables strategies to be developed to reduce carbon footprints, maybe look at where you could increase local spend, etc. So simple to use. In terms of the contract management stuff coming back, yeah, we've got a really good handbook in Cardiff. We work quite closely with Bristol Council, or have done over the years. So, but also went into Natural Resources Wales. They've got really good carbon management processes in place. So looking at what we can learn from there. But again, as Gemma says, tying that back into the various acts and making sure we're all Ardal councils are doing what they're legally required to do in terms of contract management. In terms of the first question about the consultant spend, I don't know, sorry. We'd probably have to look into that.
Okay, I mean, it would be actually very helpful to, if you could capture that and pass it back through to Robert, who can then share it with us. Thank you. Thank you for that. And to Councillor, sorry, I should say Councillor Bond, any follow-up?
Yeah, just to say thank you, Gemma, and well, thank you all of you for your inputs or responses. So I guess that the pipeline is under severe review at the moment because of money constraints, budget constraints at the moment. So you might have it to the late 2024, but obviously it's under constraints, I would suggest. And also, so if we having this Power BI, we will be able to see this information from the end of this year. Is that what you said, please? John?
I think we provide it on a quarterly basis at the moment to SLT and senior managers within Monmouthshire. I'm not sure, I'm assuming they disseminate that down through their teams. So it is available now. In terms of the contract forward plan, legally we will have to produce those, and we're seeing it as a really good tool for the market, knowing what is coming down the tracks in terms of planning and being able to allocate resources to bid for tenders, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Councillor Bond. And finally, Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. I got 3 questions here. Just to similar to Councillor Buckler was saying, how do we know it's working? What are the key what key performance indicators are being used to measure the success of the strategy, and how often are these being reviewed? Again, with Councillor Buckler and Councillor Brocklesby as well, regards the benefits to specifically to Monmouthshire communities, and I take your points, Councillor Brocklesby, about the mega hub and King Henry School. So, are there any other sort of benefits that we can be seen, and our residents would like to hear of, specifically to Monmouthshire, job creation, environmental improvements, etc., that we can note? And finally, my third question: are there plans to increase the procurement from companies that prioritise environmental good practices? How does the council ensure that social responsible procurement and that it doesn't lead to higher costs as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. Again, who wants to start?
Thank you. In terms of your last question, in terms of looking at companies with environmental good practice, the way we assess our suppliers at the moment is not just all about price, far from it. We've got a lot of due diligence that is done in terms of our pre-qualification questionnaire when a supplier first engages with us, and a lot of that would be about their environmental performance and accreditation and whether they've got environmental policies and etc. But then we also look at how they, again, social value, how they will offer social value through the delivery of the contract. And social value is not just about job employment, it's also about environmental opportunities as well that they'd be looking at. There's quite a number of different things. So yeah, that's a big part of how we make our decisions on who we contract with.
Yeah, and the other questions around KPIs and how often they're reviewed?
KPIs, obviously we're developing a socially responsible procurement policy, so there's a really good draft of that. We hope to consult with contractors probably over the next month or two, with the aim that being brought forward through your decision-making process next year. But within that, there is a set of KPIs or wellbeing indicators that we will be using. The Welsh Government is also developing a set of KPIs that will be statutory around the delivery of the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act and the Wellbeing of Future Gens Act. So they're consulting on those at the moment, and they cover a range of carbon reduction, fair work, etc. KPIs that we will be expected to report on, and we're working with Welsh Government on the development of those. In terms of the kind of what we try to do as well is deliver social value, or what we call community wellbeing benefits. So that's kind of added value. They're not a requirement of the contract, but we ask contractors to choose off a menu basically of these wellbeing indicators, what they prepare to do to deliver additional value at no cost, inverted commas. So in terms of that, certainly we've got a great track record of delivering, work placements, going into schools to talk talk about career opportunities, funding for community projects, etc. And yeah, we're just starting to roll that out, I think, within Monmouthshire, the Vale and Torvine. So quite exciting, really. That tends to be on the larger contracts. It has generally been on construction-related contracts, but it's gradually moving out. We're getting some now in social care, ICT, and other areas as well. That address, yeah.
So just finally then, the question on other benefits. You've already identified a few that Councillor Howell's recognised, but did you want to mention any others? Councillor Brocklesby, I think you were looking to come in, and then Scott.
I wanted to pick up on two things. In terms of decarbonisation, you probably know yourself, Councillor Howells, we have very little influence over the supply chains as it goes down. What levers we do have are at the point of tendering, but we don't have control over the supply chains that they're in. But we are trying to get traceability. And we are trying to look at ways in which, over time, we can have more control over that. But it is a really tricky one across the whole of the public sector. And it requires a level of due diligence and a level of process following that is part of the contract management, I would suggest, from tender, that it's something that we know we have to improve on and need to report on, and it's good to be held to account on it as we go forward. As John was saying, for the last 2.5 years, we have not had big contracts coming through. So those big contracts where we might have done things differently around the S106s or thinking about different ways we can show community benefits have yet to be seen in that way. But in smaller contracts, we are starting to think that through, along with our different partners. We have a focus, but not entirely, on how we can work with schools, how we can develop apprenticeships, how we can leave behind something which is sustainable, owned by communities or of benefit to the communities, and has involved them in that process. One of the issues, which was a learning for me, I have to say, is when that when that community benefit is determined, it could be years down the line before it is actually implemented. And so the community members that made a decision, say, in year 1, may not be the same community members who made a decision in year 6. And I think that's another case where you get unintended consequences in the kind of projects that are put in place. We have a lot of playgrounds in Monmouthshire. I think we're all aware of that those were some of the community benefits that were determined over time. That's changing as communities' needs change, but we did build a lot of playgrounds around the country, and I'm not arguing against them being used. But we're looking at a much broader sense of what could be a community benefit.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brocklesby. And Councillor Howells, are you content with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. Scott, did you want to come in briefly on this? I thought
Sorry, yes, thanks, Jay. It was to reflect more, I guess, on some of the benefits to Monmouthshire as a county. I think the one that can't be overlooked is the scale, because the spend is so significant across the 4 Ardal councils. There's a spend of 1.3 billion per year. So I guess there's some significant economies of scale to be had through that, through the delivery of that work programme. And I guess it's for the duration of that work programme, and the duration of the strategy, so up till 2028, to get some real clarity in terms of our forward work programme, and to try and harmonise that across the other 3 local authorities, so that when we go to market with big scale. I think the other one that I wanted to pick up on as well was and I know it's been touched on before, but the data, the importance of having that data to inform existing and future service provision, so that we have a real handle on what it is we're spending and with who, and whether we're getting real value for money, and then how that then shapes potential future service provision.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the questions and the responses on this. Just before I move the report, and in the words that you, I'm sure, are very familiar with, of the great Scottish bard, I wish that God the gifted gaze to see ourselves as others see us. And I'm sure this is something that you have hanging on your wall. But essentially, to be able to see ourselves as others see us, and it's worth asking ourselves the question: what do residents make of this? There's an awful lot of work. There's an awful lot of good work, and from the meeting, the questions in the meeting, you'll gather there's an awful lot of support for it. But we're trying to pick out what is, where's the beef? What's the outcome? What's the genuine achievement from the point of view of the money that is invested in this for residents? Things that they see in the report, they may well be very interested in, that there are, as Gemma was saying, 2,754 suppliers and contractors. I imagine that would raise the eyebrows of a lot of our residents, saying, really, how on earth can that be, and what do they all do, and is there a way of making that more efficient? In the breakdown of the expenditure of the 152 million, they might be interested in 19 million on human resources, as to what is that, and thinking about unpacking that from the viewpoint of residents would be really helpful. In 4.5, we are saying we're making really good progress, and almost in the same sentence, but not at the pace we would have wanted. So you get a sort of competing sense of, are we making really good progress, or are we not? Are we being kind to ourselves, or are we being realistic? And sometimes the value of all that work in a report can be so much greater if we just think of it in terms of what the residents would get from it, and the realism that can be built into it. Lots of support for all the work you do, and thank you for that. Also, thank you for all the patience in your answers to the questions. And I move the report, and I see no other comments on that. So we're now moving on to just to finish the meeting, and thank you for all of you who have attended in terms of the responses to and your patience in waiting till the end of the meeting. Councillor Brocklesby, yes.
I'd just like to thank the committee, because I think all the questions asked were very pertinent, very useful, and I think it is behoving on us to go away and reflect, but also come back next year with a much stronger, outward-looking, citizens-facing report of what the benefits are, what the KPRs, and what changes we've seen over the last year. Because as John said, we've got the foundations in place. It's now to start the big build. So thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee.
Thank you, and we'll move just to close the meeting as colleagues will be leaving. First of all, on item number 7, we've got the forward work programme, as we always do, and if you have any additional items, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just remind everyone, and in case you haven't seen my email from the end of last week, just about us having we've programmed in a special on the 3rd of December. So I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that in case it hasn't been seen. Also, Chair, we had talked about discussing risk register ideas ahead of the update coming next month, but I'm aware it's been a very long meeting. Would it perhaps be an idea to email everyone tomorrow, first thing, to elaborate, but if I could just perhaps summarise.
Great. Thank you, Robert.
We've got the 6-monthly risk register update coming to next month's meeting. and we thought it would be a good idea if perhaps we could get ideas from the committee as to any specific areas of risk that we might look into for you to scrutinise in greater detail, such that it doesn't only end up being an update from officers on a sort of general scale, but if there were ideas for specific areas, because that would give us the time. If I were to email you all with that to that effect tomorrow, if we could have a reply in the next week or so, that would probably give us enough time to get hold of a cabinet member for that date to be here to answer those questions.
Thank you, Robert. That's great. So we'll look for that in our emails tomorrow. Moving on to item number 8, which is the Scrutiny Committee action lists, and they're there for us on an attachment. Any particular issues that we wanted to flag up or raise? Councillor Bond.
Just the request about how many MCC staff are funded by grant applications.
Yeah,
I guess we need to know which areas they are.
Yes, this is from the 16th of July, I think, as an action list. So that was a question we raised last week, and
okay, we won't be on yet.
We'll be following through with that in due course. Okay, so moving on to item number 9, which is the Cabinet and Council Planner for information. Number 10 is 10A and 10B, which are the minutes of the meeting of the 11th July and the 16th of July. If there are any changes or corrections, amendments, I see none. So we move on to the close of the meeting, and reminding you of the next meeting on the 19th of November. You'll be glad to know that's not the 19th of this month. You've all done very well. Three in a month. I think that must be something of a record, Hazel. 3 performance and overview scrutiny meetings in a month. So thank you, everyone, for making space in your diaries. I hope you agree that it's been worth it, because we've had some really important reports, and you've asked some great questions that have elicited some, I think, very illuminating responses. So hopefully it's useful for officers and cabinet members and alike. So thank you very much indeed, and see you again, well, before then, but in the 19th of November at the next meeting. I close the meeting now.
Thank you, Chair.